Hello everyone, welcome to the Post Talk podcast, where we interview film professionals regarding post-production. We interview everyone from editors, visual effects artists, as well as colorists. My name is Matthew Garcia, and today we are joined with Nicholas Andrews, who is a cinematographer, editor, and colorist based in Sydney, Australia. Righty, well here I have Nicholas Andrews here on the Zoom call. Hey, how you doing, Nicholas?
I'm very well, how are you?
Doing great. Thank you so much for taking time in your schedule to be here.
My pleasure.
We're just going to jump right into this. So first question, how long have you been into post-production?
Probably easily 10 years. I would say that I was fortunate enough to study film production, film and television production throughout high school. We had quite a substantial amount of facilities based around DV tape and sort of the original Final Cut 7 and all the colored IMAX, and then from there I went straight into university studies, and of course as soon as I graduated, that was pretty much on the cusp of HD technology coming in, and so I pretty much left university with outdated qualifications, and so that was a bit frustrating, because in the years after that, anything to do regarding HD, I had to really sort of learn on my own time. And I think since then, for the past 8 or 9 years, I've just been working either for myself or for clients, and have really had to either invest in the technology myself or try and get on projects where I could learn as I go.
Gotcha.
And so it's kind of been a bit of had to go through the back door, I guess you could say, to get where I am today.
So out of everything in post, right, you have post in general, right, you have different positions. You know, you have your VFX artists, you have your colorists, your editors, your sound design people. What role, if you do have one, what do you lean more towards? You know, what's the most thing that excites you the most about post?
I would say it is a toss-up between editing and color, but it's very dependent on the project and how creative you can be with the project.
Right.
If you're working for a client, they will either have a certain brief or expectation in terms of how creative you can really be with the design or execution of whatever that video maybe. And so creative you can be with the most simple jobs, and sometimes how the most creative job, what you thought would be the most creative job can end up being very straight down the line. And I, again, in the effort to stay as flexible as possible, I really I can't really close myself off to too much at this stage in terms of the type of work I'm doing, or the type of role that I really, I guess, enjoy the most. I guess I'm not at that sort of stage where I can really turn down work that I know will either be quite limiting creatively.
I see.
Because editing is where you truly know whether what you shot is going to work.
Right.
And color is very much the icing on the cake. And you can't save a shit film with good color. Because I think the audience is a lot more intuitive, and sometimes you can't forgive a terrible story, even if it looks pretty. And so I get much more gratification when I know that the cut works on a subliminal level, and someone who's coming in cold to the project gets it. Nice. I think that's definitely the most satisfying part about it.
Right. I don't know about you, but I compare grading a lot to how a kitchen kind of works, or cooking in a sense. You know,
yes.
It's kind of exactly like you said. It's like the icing on the cake. But if the cake itself isn't that great, well then, what's the icing gonna do?
Yeah, see, it's the quality of the ingredients, and right. I think sometimes I feel like sometimes I have to either explain to the client sometimes later on in the process that color unfortunately won't save the project if there's terminal issues that have happened throughout filming or editing. And I think sometimes more and more now I find that that with editing, with color grading, that being sort of one of the last sort of stages of the post-production pipeline, I find that the production leans on that end to really solve a lot of problems that have cropped up earlier in the production process. And a lot of the time it can be a little bit too late to really solve those issues. And no matter the quality of film, like really coloring should really only be the last 25% of the film. Like if that other 75% is lacking or doesn't have that magic to it yet, then there's no way the color is really going to bring that to life on an overall level.
When did you first come in contact with color grading as a whole? You know, with the subject of it.
Consciously, or probably about 5 years ago, when I was still working. I was very much holding on to Final Cut 7 in terms of it being my main editor, as it was just it's sort of a near perfect program for basic editing. And of course it had very elementary effects built into it, but you could also attach a lot of plugins to it. And eventually I did bite the bullet and move on to Premiere, which was obviously the closest system that still felt like Final Cut 7. As obviously Final Cut 10 reinvented itself in a more of an iMovie presentation, and that didn't really work for me. And I started. I think Premiere is, to be honest, a lot of people put a lot of shit on Premiere, even though Premiere is more of an editing and production tool than it is television production tool than it is a color is very much supplementary. And to be honest, because I spent easily a good 2 or so years coloring in Premiere exclusively before moving on to Resolve, if you have a stable enough and powerful enough computer, Premiere can get you pretty much 90% the same result as Resolve, at least up at this stage. But people, obviously, it's when you're working under time constraints and you want a much more specialized program, of course you would move on to Premiere or Baselight or something like that. But Premiere as a tool can definitely do 90% of the exact same things as Resolve can, just in a different way. And I think a lot of people expect Premiere to do every job. But at the same time, I can turn to Resolve and say Resolve is pretty clunky when it comes to editing, being intuitive with editing, and it's sort of sound design and side is definitely a work in progress. And so people looking at it as the holy grail is a little bit short-sighted as well. So I think they both have that. To be honest, if I had a job starting tomorrow that required a little bit of sort of VFX work, and I would still edit the project in Premiere and migrate that to Resolve. And so I'm very much still in that. I'm still in both worlds as much as possible. And to be honest, the majority of the work still coming in that I color grade is either being migrated from Premiere or Avid. And so Premiere is still very much sort of the home base for, and certainly of my own personal projects as well when it comes to VFX and editing and arranging, and even finishing. Sometimes I'll spit something out of Resolve back into Premiere if there's any sort of VFX component, or just because, or even with quality control, because I do find that sometimes I can get a better, either just through experience, I just know Premiere so much more intuitively than Resolve, and so sometimes I do a bit of quality checking in Premiere, then adjust in Resolve, then put it back into Premiere again, if that makes sense. So it's kind of but people have different ways of working, and mine's a little bit convoluted, but I think that with something like Resolve that really does still feel like a work in progress, for the total package of
Right.
editing to finishing. I think there's no harm in being across multiple programs,
Hmm.
especially when you're dealing with collaborators who work in different programs for different reasons as well. It's the same with working in like Cubase to Reason to what's the other one? It escapes me, but like the fact that you can still have multiple audio
Hmm.
NLEs, uh,
Oh yeah.
it's like there's no reason why we have to all be in one camp for the editing grading pipeline.
Right.
And I think that it's good that the doors are still open between
Mhm.
multiple programs, and even though it could be simplified and it could be made more universal in how round trips are done, I think that it's for color, Resolve is definitely gives you that much more granular control in a
Right.
much more stable environment. And when you're working under the pump and you've got to
Right.
do 200 or 300 shots in a day,
Hmm.
you need that trust in the program that it's not going to slow you down.
You're absolutely right. People are seeing Resolve as this holy grail in a sense. And I had talked to these guys, and they were like really asking me a lot of questions about Resolve in the editing tab. And I was like, man, it's just not there yet. It's good, but it's it's not quite there. And I really what I compare it to is I think it's supposed to be a supplement, an add-on for those round trips for like conforming really. It's if it's not a color grading software if you don't have that ability to be able to round trip, right? And so I think that's really why the edit tab is there, more so to speak. And then you can be like, oh okay, yeah, and then let's spit it back out, spit it back in. Cool. Now we got to conform. Let's get to grading. I think it's just to help get you to that grading part again. Because it did start out as a grading platform, right?
And that's how I think that's how people have to view Premiere, with color being a supplementary tool to its editing
Right.
and formatting abilities, because um, one program just can't do everything. And I know Blackmagic is trying to
Mm-hmm.
move into that zone
Mm-hmm.
in being an all-in-one production pipeline.
Mm-hmm.
And I do think that things will gradually change over the next 5 years,
Mm-hmm.
as raw footage and raw capture changes, and some companies just have to prioritize certain things, and Premiere knows its lane, and then it's going to stay in that lane no matter how
Right.
much Resolve evolves in terms of its developments in color. Premiere just can't catch up, and
Mm-hmm.
so Adobe has 5 or 6 different flagship kind of programs to do with
Mm-hmm.
photo, audio, and design,
Right.
that Premiere just fits into a part of that puzzle, and so it's always going to be at some sort of disadvantage. And I think it's sort of where we are now. It's impossible to close yourself off
Mm-hmm.
to any of those programs, because you will be stitched up when a client says, "Oh, we did all our editing in Avid, and now we wanted to move it into Resolve, but then we want to export it out of Premiere." And so it's kind of like you have to have some sort of you can't be too snobbish, or you can't completely close yourself off to the fact that um, that it is a multi-laned sort of workflow that we still exist in
Right.
for the next 5+ years,
Mm.
um, until things are simplified again. Because it's definitely, you can definitely see that with cameras now, where cameras on the sort of that's mid-tier production level, where the cameras are really becoming so close to each other
Mm.
that the
Right.
lane, that the brand or the thing that you want is they're not that too far apart. And
Right.
I think that with editing and post-production, we'll eventually get to that point where there's very little to separate them.
Mm.
Um, but for now, I think we still have to be across everything, but not shut out any particular uh, way of working or sort of preference for a preferred program.
Mm. I agree. And so in this time that you've worked in post, I imagine you've worked on many projects. Is there one that sticks out to you the most, where you can look at it confidently and be like, I'm just really proud of this piece of work?
No,
Really?
no.
Wow.
And that's more of a slight against me than any particular project or client. I think that I find that grading. I think grading, especially when you have so many, especially with long form projects, when you have so many variables, that I feel like I never really get enough time to live with the project when I'm not working on it, if that makes sense.
Right.
I feel like the revision process, or the stepping away and viewing it on different platforms, or coming back to it with fresh eyes, I feel like I never truly get enough time to really sink in to teasing out all the discrepancies there may be. There may even I only notice, but all those things that really sort of hold it back from being close to perfect. And it's not so much like, it's more perfection in the sense that I can back every decision I've made, as opposed to like just skimping on something because time is against me, or I've got another 500 shots to do. And you know what I mean? Like it's you can only apply so much. Like I can get more out of sitting with like a 20 shot commercial, as opposed to like a feature that's got like 800, 900 shots. And so you have to spread your time and your attention to detail. You can only go so far. And I find that I always sort of come up just a bit short in terms of really coming away going like I truly nailed that, or I really got I did the best I could for it. And my goal is to just constantly try and refine that process, so I have more time to come back and revise. Even if they don't give me that time, it's really like delegating your time better when you do have the project, so that you have the ability to like the instinct can only get you so far. But it's the same with with audio. Like you have ear fatigue, you have eye fatigue with video, in the sense that after a while you lose perspective on what you're seeing, and you start making judgments that are mistakes that aren't that work against you, because you're only human. And so what you see after a while is probably not the true representation of what it will be, or what you'd like it to be. It's just because you're exhausted, that's what you want it to look like. And so having the ability to come back to it and go, it really doesn't look that great, or I can make it look better, comes from having that distance from it, where you've tried something, then you sat with it, you've recovered, and you come back. And oftentimes you don't get that ability, that option to do that. Sometimes it's just like, oh, hey, you have 24 hours from drop off to pick up on this project. And it's like, and in that time you have to do, potentially, it can be sometimes you do 100 shots or something, and it's just like, well, how am I supposed to do something intense and be able to back every decision? And really it's just about getting to the finish line without any major technical obvious things. You just want the client to be able, by the time you get to that point, you just want the client to sign off on it. And so that, I guess that what's the word, having true satisfaction over your is something that still eludes me a little bit. And to be honest, the works that I have been either closest to being most proud, or really sort of proud of, are the ones that don't even look that great, to be honest. And I think that's because they've spent a bit more time on the story. I find that sometimes stuff that looks very flashy, or is designed to be very flashy, very visual, sometimes don't have the narrative or emotional backbone to it. And so while it may look good, it's like I don't care what I'm looking at. And so I'm very much detached from the content, because I think it comes back to what I was saying initially. Like, no matter what it looks like, if I don't resonate with it in any sort of emotional way, it doesn't. I don't really care what it looks like after a while.
Right. It's hard to get invested.
There's you have to. Story still conquers all, no matter what the content is. Like, there's nothing there that has any sort of like being impressed by visuals only gets you so far. And I think things like things like Instagram are quite dangerous now, where it is such a upfront, surface level
Right.
visual medium
Mm-hmm.
that that you have very little room to showcase anything long form,
Mm-hmm.
or even like what your images or trailers or whatever may be attached to. I think like everything is so upfront, and people are judging things on how it looks more so than what actually is it's attached to. That we live in this very sort of surface level uh, way of consuming stuff now. That like, you know, to be honest, like the majority of the work I do, no one would really ever see. You know what I mean? Like, it's, you know what I mean? They actually see it. Like, they see it. They see that it exists, but they
Mm-hmm.
don't actually see it in terms of like, well, I'll watch that music video or that ad or that short film or something like that. It's like you have, you know, like even with people talking about like, oh, how long should a short film be, or how long should a show reel be? And it's kind of like, well, how long is your attention span when you're scrolling through your
Right.
Instagram feed? You know,
Absolutely.
like that's how long something should be. And to be honest, like it's a bit sad that um, people really gravitate towards the idea of doing the work more than the work itself, if that
Mhm.
makes sense.
Right.
Like
You're
I've that's where, because I kind of do this job or what I do here to give me the time or the support to kind of make my own work in the when I get that time. But I know that what I do make doesn't have the eyes on it that I'd like, more than the idea of me making that work. Does that make sense? Like, if you people like the idea that they're doing something more than what they're actually doing. If that makes Does that make sense?
No, no, yeah, you're absolutely right. I remember when I was a bit younger, Vine. It was called Vine. It was the big popular thing. I guess now it's TikTok in a sense, right?
Mm-hmm.
It was 6 second videos, and it really scared the hell out of me because I was like, wow, these videos are only 6 seconds, and you will spend hours just sitting there watching these 6 second videos, and your attention span is like, great, next one, great, next one. So I think that is somewhat translating into this world of like you're saying, it's like someone will actually sit down and be like, yeah, I'm gonna actually sit down and watch your short film, you know?
Yeah,
Or
it's tough to, because you look back on all that stuff and it means nothing. Like, all the content is fluff and it's nothing, and it's trained you to have such a short attention span
Right.
to uh, and so that when anything requires more from you, it's either got to be so good,
Mm-hmm.
or it has to be so short that you are willing to kind of switch off the timer in your brain.
Mm.
Um, and that's why it's a little bit disheartening, where to get to that place, people are putting the emphasis on the visuals, because obviously living in such a visual world now, people, like I said, gravitate towards more how something to gravitate towards something more of how it looks than the actual content.
Mm. I see.
and and uh, and you see that in the quality of work. Or for me, like the quality of, like, what I work on looks better than it actually is. You know what I mean? Like
Mhm.
the actual things will look great, but there's absolutely, can sometimes be very little heart or soul in it,
Right.
and or the storytelling is just inferior to the visual quality.
Mm.
And um, I feel like people are getting off more on the fact that something looks nice
Right.
than something actually has any sort of backbone or sort of lasting impression to it.
Mm.
And I think people are forgetting. Um, I think some people are forgetting how to tell stories, if that makes sense.
No, you're absolutely right. I don't hate superhero films, for an instance, for an example. But I see it a lot there. The slow motion of them fighting something. I'll go to sleep. I'll wake up. I'm like, oh, they're still beating the crap out of things. I'll go back to sleep. You know, because I'm just like, it bores me. It really does. I'm more moved by films that actually will make me feel something. And I said this the other day, being this, and you can relate to this as well, or anybody who's listening to this that loves filmmaking in any sort of a role. When you watch a film, you try to analyze it, right? You almost have like your pair of sunglasses where you try to think of how they're shooting about it. You think of the behind the scenes. And my thing is, if a movie is powerful enough to make me take those glasses off and give a crap about the story, then it's done its job. That's not easy for someone who understands a lot of behind the scenes, and then to just forget about it and actually start visually caring about a story. Then that's powerful, in my opinion. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's getting harder and harder to do. I mean, to be honest, like I try to stay away from social media as much as I can in a non-professional sense, like in that.
Yes.
I try to, but unfortunately, it's trained me in such a way that for the most part, I consume most television and film at about 2 speed now. To be honest, when I watch something and play it back, like if I can watch it at a much increased speed, I actually will, because I don't. Not only can I get through things quicker, it's almost like speed reading, but I do that for film and television now.
I can understand
just because I prefer to get through 2 or 3 movies in an evening than lock out, have to fall asleep to one, if that makes sense. Like I'd rather be able to get through and watch a couple of things, and not only does that give you, I guess, the benefit of being able to get through more work, but at the same time, it's still training you to have less of an attention span. And to be honest, like it does all stem back to what social media and has done over the past 10 years.
Right.
And to be honest, I think that I think it's done a lot more permanent damage, subliminally, than people think it has.
Right.
And in terms of someone trying to generate interesting work or to cut through, when you're in the sort of the lower rungs of, if you're not a Netflix or you're not a sort of VOD release kind of thing, suddenly if you don't have that legitimacy behind you, trying to generate work or interest around your work is quite tough. And that's why a lot of people sort of end up creating what can be very soulless material, because they know that a greater time investment or emotional investment doesn't resonate with most people, because they're not giving enough of themselves to the product or the content to begin with.
Right.
And so, I mean, that's exactly what happened to me this year. Like I chose to make like an ad like a proof of concept kind of spec ad for myself. And in the past, the last few things I've made have been short films that have either been like 12, 15, kind of 20-minute in length things. And suddenly you go from something that would require a lot more planning and detail and sort of emotional sort of thought to something that's only 90 seconds long and has absolutely no sort of emotional weight whatsoever, but it looks cool. You know what I mean? Like that's and so that's as far as I thought with it. But I deliberately designed it that way because I knew that I'd have more eyes. The chance of having more eyes on my work at something that's only 90 seconds, as opposed to trying to convince somebody to carve out 15 or 20 minutes to watch something. And so it's definitely influenced the way that I create any of my own work, and also the type of stories that I would want to tell going forward. I think social media is definitely interesting as a professional tool. Like I definitely know that there's definitely more visibility in this sort of, I guess, public forum than there is with websites, and having sort of your own personally designed forum. I think being in the sort of town square with everybody else is definitely doing us more favors for getting your work out there and being able to mingle directly with people. I mean, just like the fact that we're talking right now comes from sort of being connected sort of via sort of a third party. And so, weird things like that happen, but they only happen this way. And so I totally get the validity of it and the powerful nature of it. But I think that it's, I think that it's definitely shaping content that has a lot more sort of looks than brains, so to speak. And I think that for all the, as much as I like working on sort of pretty and good looking footage and making and feeling like I'm developing as any sort of like creative, I still feel sometimes either quite unfulfilled or empty at the end of it, because I know that the content itself really doesn't have much going for it beyond the fact that it may look pretty. And usually just in the same way that, it's how hard it may be for films these days to be, sometimes several years in development and then come and go within 1 week of it being released. That's why it's so hard for mid-tier films to get made in the studio system anymore, because you either have to be a tentpole sort of franchise or have the potential to build a following that can span years, or you have to be an independent that knows it's independent and will live in the independent lane in the hope that somebody from a franchise world notices you and pick you up and put you in their franchise, in their sort of pool. Like the idea that you're spending $50-60 million on comedies or action movies doesn't really, or dramas doesn't really, thrillers doesn't exist anymore. And that sort of lane has completely sort of disappeared. And so the trickle down effect of that is that everyone is trying to get attention visually because that's all anyone has time for. And so I get it. I'm just sort of a bit old fashioned in that sense. And I just don't. It's just I get better results when I care about the project. That's kind of a long way of saying it.
Your heart's in it.
Yeah, exactly. It doesn't matter what you're doing. Like if you care about it more, or give a shit about like what you're doing is contributing to something and making it better, then you will just without doubt get a better result.
I do understand that you do also do DP work often, and I was going to ask, do you enjoy being in the post room more, or do you enjoy being on set more as a DP?
It depends on the project, to be honest. Like I love being on set and making something and finding ways to deliberately shoot, knowing that you're shooting to edit and being mindful of like the decisions that you make on set, how that's either going to stitch you up or free you up when it comes to the edit or the grade. And there's a lot of satisfaction when you have an idea in your head and you're able to execute it on set, either through the blocking, the lighting, the camera move, or something like that. That is very satisfying when you know you're sort of halfway there before you even hit the edit. But I think I've gravitated more towards post-production, in the sense that I find that I can do more work for other people, like quicker, in the sense that filming is a very intensive and sometimes drawn out process where you're waiting around months for something to happen. And it can be very physical. And post, you can just, someone will drop around a drive to your house and you'll do it. You pop it in the mailbox and they come pick it up and they pay you, and it's great. Like it's I work from home, so it's just I just have the ability to pick at things at my own sort of leisure without having to truly sort of clock on and clock off. And that is definitely it. In terms of an actual job, that's definitely the most sort of favourable setup. But I would prefer. I'm hoping to do more shooting next year, but I've really set myself the restriction that it's only on really work that I care about, just because filming is such a physical thing for me, in terms of either actually physically being with the camera or the actual like scouting, blocking, gear, hauling gear around, driving. Like, it's the actual physicality of filming to me is as much as just sitting there behind the eyepiece or filming something, and that sort of physical commitment to me is really like, if I'm going to be away from home for long hours, like, I want it to be for something that actually could be good,
Right.
and it's not just complete fluff. Like, it's just because it just comes and goes so quickly, and I get it as I get it. Like, you don't always have those options, but I definitely think that if you want to give your best performance, or your best sort of like, you want to be present and do the best you can. Like, you've got to be able to have some. You've got to be able, like, to have some control over that sort of job satisfaction, creative satisfaction.
Right. Well, this wraps up a majority of my questions. And again, thank you so much for allowing us to chat and have this chat. It's been awesome. I hope that anyone's listening has learned a lot as well. To wrap it up, do you have anything to plug? Maybe to go through what services you provide as well and that sort of stuff.
Yeah, sure. I am primarily a colorist, but I also do editing and sound design. You can find me on Instagram. I'm sure you can have a handle attached to that, wherever you end up posting this. Yeah, or just reach me. Just reach me on Instagram or send me an email if anyone needs any work done. But yeah, I do all kinds of post work at the moment. So shorts, music videos, ads. Just happy to work with new clients and new projects, new cameras. It always keeps you on your toes, which is exciting.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Nicholas. It's been great having you.
My pleasure. Thanks for reaching out. And yeah, I'm sure we'll speak again soon.
And this has been the Post Talk Podcast. Thank you for tuning in, and we will be releasing more episodes every other week. You can find us on social media on Instagram at thepost.talkpodcast, on Twitter at thepost talk podcast, and on Facebook as the Post Talk Podcast.